A girl's best ally in the sprawl is her bot dog, no matter the model or firmware version. They're always loyal, even when the world burns around you. I had a border collie patchwork unit I called Kilo, 13, running on some legacy code from before the Pulse. He finally broke down in 2173, his chassis corroded and his core too fried to save. Kilo, 13 was my ride or die, and when he was gone, it was like losing a chunk of my soul. We landed in the forgotten alleyways of Sector 72, a maze of crumbled concrete walls and power lines tangled like spiderwebs. The locals didn't look thrilled to see us. Men hovered near the shadows, their cyber optics locked on us, and we locked back. Women ducked into glowing tenements, yanking their kids out of sight. Typical reaction to corpos like us. They didn't know we weren't there to hack their lives apart. I was there to patch people up, Medigel in one hand, a handful of hope in the other. It took some coaxing, but an old man shuffled forward, dragging a makeshift cane that looked like it was made from a repurposed shock baton. Through a translator drone buzzing at my shoulder, he muttered about a nasty rash creeping up his leg. I told him I needed to touch the area for a proper scan. He nodded, and I lifted the fabric. The infection was rough, skin cracked like dried circuitry. I dosed him with nano antibiotics, a quick fix from my pack. Not ideal, but it would hold. Why the hell are we wasting good meds on these people? They hate us, grumbled Kyle, one of the escort mercs watching my back. I shot him a glare. Doesn't matter if they hate us. I'm here to help, not make friends. Go babysit someone else. He snorted and stomped off, muttering under his breath. A younger guy limped over next, his posture stiff with suspicion. His ankle was swollen, classic overstress injury. I handed him an ankle brace, one I'd used during a high-speed skirmish a few months back. Tossing him a cryopack, I showed him how to dull the swelling. He nodded reluctantly, took the gear, and shuffled off. As the sun dipped below the skyline, the crew started relaxing. Mercs who usually had one finger on the trigger were cracking jokes, kicking a hover ball around with local kids. No bullets, no explosions, no blood. It was surreal. I leaned against a rusted hover bike and watched, a rare smile creeping onto my face. Then she walked in, a girl about my age, cradling a dog in her arms. It wasn't a bot, just a real dog, the scrappy kind you'd see scavenging in neon-drenched gutters. His fur was patchy, his tail wagging weakly. He looked like he'd been through hell. Hey, I'm not a dog doc. I patch people, not pets, I tried to explain through the drone. She pressed the dog into my chest anyway, her face hard with determination. No way she was backing down. I set the dog down. He couldn't put weight on one leg, and there was a nasty gash along his side. My chest tightened. I grabbed a water pouch, cleaned the wound as gently as I could, and slathered it with Medigel. Wrapping the poor guy in fresh synth gauze, I hoped the leg wasn't anything worse than trauma. The girl smiled when I was done. Her gratitude lit up the dim alley like a neon sign. She hugged her dog close as it licked my face, breath rancid enough to short-circuit me. I waved them off, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Got yourself a new girlfriend, Astra? Teased Drew, another merc in the group. Shut up, I shot back, feeling my cheeks heat. It's the dog, idiot. By the time we were packing up, I'd handed out more meds, bandages, and nutrient packs than I could count. Through the translator drone, I told them we'd be back soon. The villagers seemed less skittish now, going about their lives as if we weren't shadows at their doorstep. Maybe they'd stopped seeing us as corpo scum, or maybe it was just me being naive. As we loaded into the hovercraft, an older man ran out, waving frantically. The drone translated his warning. A gang from the outer districts had threatened them, promising death if they kept talking to outsiders. He told us not to come back. We shrugged it off. We'd dealt with district gangs before. If they came for us, we'd handle them the same way. Still, his words clung to me like static. The city eats its own, and we were just ghosts passing through. A few cycles later, we drifted back into the zone. 72 cluster. This time, the reception was different. The locals weren't skittering into corners or darting behind holographic curtains. They were actually smiling, lining up under the sickly glow of busted neon signs, waiting for help. It was a weird feeling, a break from the usual grind of sealing bullet wounds and reattaching severed limbs. For once, I wasn't saving lives, I was patching them. I set up shop in a crumbling biocrete safe house, ushered in by a local guy whose only augmentation seemed to be a jury-rigged arm servo. A couple of my squad mates stood sentinel outside, rifles locked and powered. That irked me. Hey, do me a favor, lower your heat. You're scaring the civvies, I whispered harshly. One of them, Dex, shrugged, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly. Not happening, Astra. These people are eyeballing us hard. I clenched my fists. These people? The ones holding empty med bottles and wincing from chronic August strain? Yeah, totally plotting to frag us with their toothaches. Stand down. Dex just smirked and turned back to scanning the streets. Do your job, and we'll do ours, he muttered. I rolled my eyes and dove into the queue of patients. Most complaints were minor: synthetic joint pains, overworked cybernetics, infections from poor August maintenance. A couple of ibuprofen packs or quick nanobot treatments solved them. It felt easy. Almost too easy. Then she walked in, the girl with the dog. Or, in this case, the girl and her mutt. He was walking this time, barking like an old servomotor struggling to start. My pulse jumped. Well, look who's back on all fours, I exclaimed, grinning. Her laugh lit up the room like a rare sunrise. Through the translator drone, I heard her joke, Mr. Doc fixed him good. Everything okay with you? I asked, eyeing her curiously. She hesitated, then pointed to her abdomen, shifting uncomfortably. I scratched the back of my head awkwardly. Cramps? Something else. Great. Total med pro moment. Real smooth. She nodded, and I handed her a couple of pill packs. Take 2 every few hours. They'll help. She rattled the container and smiled. You're good to us. The gangs hate you, but you help us, she said. Her dog wagged its tail, brushing against my leg like we were suddenly best friends. I'm just doing my job, I said, brushing it off. What's your name? I asked. She grinned mischievously. What a strange name you have. I'll call you Doctor. I laughed. Fair enough. When will you let me know your name then? She smirked. Only if you stay for dinner. Did she blush? Or was that just the haze of neon reflecting off her skin? I couldn't tell. I excused myself and flagged down Vaughn, our unit leader. Hey, boss, think we can hang out longer? The locals are inviting us for dinner. Vaughn's stare could have frozen my neural core. You've lost your damn mind. No, Astra, we're not staying for dinner. Wrap it up. Wheels up in 30. I sighed and went back inside to break the news. Sorry, no dinner tonight, I said. She frowned briefly, then shrugged it off. Then take this, she said, pulling something wrapped in an old synfiber cloth from her bag. Wrote, she called it, pressing it into my hands. I'd bake it myself. The weight of her gesture hit me like a power surge. Thank you, I said, almost in a whisper. I wish I had something to give you back. She shook her head, her smile warm. You already do so much, Doctor. Just promise me one thing, always be good. I extended my hand and she took it. Her grip was soft but firm. Promise, I said. Later, back in my bunker pod, I unwrapped the bread. I had no idea what rote was or whether it was even edible. Dex lounged nearby, his august arm resting on a crate. You're seriously gonna eat that? Probably laced with neurotoxins. If it is, I know where you recharge, I quipped, tearing off a piece. To my surprise, it was incredible. moist, fragrant, with a hint of spice and sweetness that was almost otherworldly. I handed a chunk to Dex, who raised a skeptical brow but took a bite. "Holy hell, Astra, this is good," he said around a mouthful. Word spread fast. Within minutes, half the squad was crowding my pod, begging for a taste. I fought them off as best I could but ultimately surrendered. The rote was gone in minutes, but the warmth of her kindness lingered. The day was dragging on, the kind that makes you itch for answers to questions you don't really want answered. I finally turned to her, the girl with the sharp smile and the scrappy mutt. "Caitlin," I said, using her name for the first time. "The street gangs, do they come here often?" Her playful demeanor evaporated like smoke in the rain. She shifted, staring at the cracked floor of the med shack. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They come after you leave. They call my uncle a traitor. Said he took meds from outsiders. They killed him." I froze, a shard of guilt twisting in my chest. I'd seen this coming. Of course I had. "Caitlin, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to help." Her shrug was as resigned as the flickering neon outside. "This is life here, doctor. We need help, but taking it always brings bad things too." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Finally, I asked, "Do you know where these gangs are coming from?" Her gaze lifted, hesitant but sharp. "From the sprawl, near the old Corp ruins. Have you been there?" I nodded slowly. The memory hit like a static jolt. Gritty firefights, blood mixing with oil in the gutters, the screams of friends cut down by gunfire. "Yeah, we've been. I'm sorry we couldn't stop them." "You're special, Doctor," Caitlin said softly, her eyes locking with mine. "You come to help, not kill. You're better than them. But this is our life. We can't escape it. Promise me something." "What's that?" Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. "Promise you will never stop helping people." I nodded, my throat tight. "I promise." She hugged me then, her frame slight but warm, her mutt barking in the corner like it understood. Before I could even process the moment, she handed me another loaf of rote. I grinned like a kid on their first charge cycle. "More of that delicious bread I can't pronounce?" "You spoil me, Caitlin." She laughed, a sound that felt too good for the grimy world outside. That night, back at base, the rope became an instant hit. "Hey, Astra's got the hookup," shouted Riker, one of the gearheads. Soon, half the crew was crowding my bunk pod, grabbing for pieces of the sweet bread. Even Captain Marks wandered over, snagging a slice with a rare smile. By the time the laughter died down, I was already counting the days until we'd head back to Caitlin's little enclave. The next time we rolled in, something was wrong. The air was heavy, almost electric, but not in the good way. No Caitlin. No mutt. No villagers waiting with hopeful smiles. Just silence. "The hell's going on?" muttered Dex, his augmented arm twitching nervously. "Smells off," Riker said, his nose wrinkling. I knew the smell. It hit like a punch to the gut, death rot. The kind of decay that lingers, telling you the story before you even see it. My stomach twisted as we fanned out, checking the crumbling buildings. Bodies. Everywhere. Families huddled together in frozen terror, blood pooling beneath them. Women. Children. Men. No one was spared. Some were mutilated, others, it was too much. My fists clenched until my nails bit into my palms. "Fuck this," I snarled, my voice shaking. "Fucking gang scum. They'll pay for this." "Astra," someone called from inside a familiar house. I stumbled through the doorway. There she was. Caitlin. Her dog curled at her side. Both lifeless, their fragile warmth stolen by monsters. My vision blurred, and my body moved without thought. Should I scream? Collapse? I didn't know anymore. I stumbled back into the street. "We're done here," I growled at Vaughn. He approached cautiously. "Astra, you okay?" No, I snapped, my voice sharp as a blade. Not even close. Riker came over, holding out a small, entrenching tool. Let's do this right, he said. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Together, we carried Caitlin and her mutt beyond the village ruins. The others joined, silently pooling their tools, their hands, their strength. Even Vaughn helped, wrapping her body in an old synth sheet before lowering her into the grave. Want to say something? Vaughn asked gently. No, sir. I just want them all dead, I replied coldly. The squad didn't argue. We'd all seen too much, but today, this was different. The air was heavy with shared grief, and for once, even the toughest among us looked hollow. Back at base, I collapsed into my pod, staring blankly at the flickering hollow lights above. Caitlin was gone, but what she stood for burned bright in my memory. Not every soul in this broken city was out to kill us. She'd been proof that light could survive, even in the shadow of the worst kind of darkness. I hear her voice sometimes when the static of my own thoughts grows too loud. Doctor, promise me you'll never stop helping others. I promise, Caitlin. Days blurred together, like neon streaks reflected in rain-slick pavement. The city didn't pause, and neither did the war. We kept returning to Zone 72, but the Enclave was no longer the same. Caitlin's neighborhood, her smile, her warmth, her scrappy mutt was gone. What remained were scorched walls and shattered dreams, the remnants of a massacre too brutal to forget. They're saying survivors fled underground, Riker muttered, his cyber arm whirring as he adjusted the stock of his rifle. Old maintenance tunnels, maybe. Or they're hiding in the ruins of the Corp Towers, Dex added, scanning the horizon with his augmented optics. The faint hum of his lenses grated against my nerves. Either way, they're ghosts now. I didn't respond. The weight of Caitlin's promise still clung to me, sharp and unrelenting. Never stop helping others. But what was left to help in this cursed sector? Nothing but ashes and silence. As the crew spread out to secure the perimeter, I caught sight of something, a faint glow against the rubble. Kneeling down, I found it, a battered hollow bracelet, flickering weakly. Caitlin had been wearing one the last time I saw her. My heart jolted. Was this hers? A trace of her, left behind like a whisper? I slipped it into my pocket, vowing to repair it later. Back at base, I couldn't sleep. The hollow bracelet sat on my workbench, its soft pulses of light almost hypnotic. I connected it to my data jack, letting my neural interface link up with the broken device. Fragments of audio and visuals poured into my head, memories it had captured before its circuits were fried. Doctor, Caitlin's voice echoed faintly. The image was grainy, distorted, but it was her. She was smiling, holding out a fresh loaf of rote as her mutt barked in the background. You promised. The feed cut out abruptly, replaced by static and a high-pitched whine that made me wince. I slammed the disconnect switch, ripping the jack from my temple. My hands were shaking. Riker knocked on the pod door, his voice muffled. Astra, briefing in 10. New op. I forced myself to breathe. On my way, I called back, shoving the bracelet into a pouch. The new mission was simple on paper, recon and retrieval. Word had reached us about a gang stronghold not far from Zone 72, same group responsible for Caitlin's murder. They were holed up in a decommissioned industrial plant, retrofitted with security drones and automated turrets. Vaughn's plan was straightforward. Go in quiet, gather intel, and, if possible, eliminate key targets. Try not to get yourselves killed, Vaughn barked, his tone sharp but laced with unspoken worry. We're short enough on medics as it is. The crew loaded into the hovercraft, the hum of its engines filling the air. I stared out the window, my jaw clenched. This wasn't just another mission. For me, this was personal. The plant was a fortress of rusted steel and flickering LEDs, surrounded by layers of scrap and barricades. From the moment we stepped onto the outskirts, my cybernetic enhancements buzzed with unease. Heat signatures lit up my HUD, guards, drones, and something larger patrolling deeper inside. "We split here," Vaughn said, gesturing to the map on his hollow pad. "Astra, Riker, Dex, you're on infiltration. Find out what they're planning. The rest of us will create a distraction if things go loud." Riker gave me a reassuring nod. "Let's show these bastards what happens when they mess with the wrong zone." The three of us moved silently through the shadows, avoiding the glowing eyes of sentry drones and the rhythmic sweep of automated turrets. My augmented legs allowed me to move with precision, every step calculated and silent. Dex's optics scanned ahead, marking potential threats. We slipped into the main building through a gap in the crumbling wall. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of oil and decay. Holographic schematics floated in my HUD, guiding us toward a central hub where intel was likely stored. As we rounded a corner, we froze. Two gang members stood by a console, their backs to us. Both were heavily modified, one with a mechanical arm ending in a plasma cutter, the other with glowing lines etched into their skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. They were discussing shipments, illegal implants, weapons, and something called neuronet sync. I signaled to Dex, who disabled their communications with a quick EMP pulse. Riker moved in, taking them down with surgical precision. They dropped without a sound. We accessed the console, decrypting files as fast as the system would allow. My neural link buzzed with streams of data, shipment logs, access codes, and most chillingly, surveillance footage. One file caught my attention immediately, a time-stamped video of Caitlin's village, recorded just hours before the massacre. The gang leader's voice echoed through the feed. "No loose ends. Burn it all." My vision blurred with rage, and my hands clenched into fists. "We take them out. All of them." Riker hesitated. "That's not the mission, Astra. We're here for intel." I rounded on him, my voice cold and sharp. "You saw what they did. We're not walking away from this." Before he could argue, an alarm blared. We'd been spotted. Chaos erupted as the base came alive with defenses. Drones swarmed toward us, their plasma turrets glowing ominously. Dex scrambled to disable as many as he could, while Riker laid down covering fire. I activated my wrist blades, slicing through anything that got too close. Vaughn's voice crackled in my comms. "What the hell's going on, Astra?" "Plans changed," I growled, cutting the connection. We fought our way through the corridors, my body moving on pure instinct. Every slash of my blades, every shot from Riker's rifle, it wasn't enough to quench the fire burning inside me. By the time we reached the central core, I was drenched in sweat, my breath ragged. The gang leader was there, flanked by two massive androids. His cybernetic eyes glinted with malice. "So, you're the ones making noise." "You killed them," I spat, stepping forward. "The villagers. Caitlin. You wiped them out like they were nothing." He sneered. "And what are you gonna do about it, Doc?" I didn't respond. I just moved. I surged forward, blades gleaming under the cold, artificial light of the central core. The gang leader barely flinched as his android bodyguards stepped in front of him, towering metal constructs designed for brute force and intimidation. Their hydraulic joints hissed as they moved, the hum of their power cores resonating in my ears. "Take the right one," Riker called, already opening fire on the android to the left. His plasma rifle spat bolts of energy that seared into the metal shell, leaving glowing scorch marks. "I'll handle this one," I growled, dodging as the android swung a massive arm, its impact cracking the floor where I'd been standing a moment earlier. My August legs launched me into the air, flipping over the hulking machine as I slashed at its exposed wiring with my wrist blades. Sparks erupted, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. Dex scrambled to disable the turrets that popped out of the walls, their automated barrels locking onto us with deadly precision. "Could use some cover here," he shouted, frantically typing commands into his wrist console. The android turned, its glowing red optics tracking my every move. Its arm unfolded, revealing a built-in flamethrower that roared to life with a burst of searing heat. I rolled to the side, the flames licking at my heels as I darted behind a pillar for cover. My HUD flashed warnings, detecting rising temperatures and damage to my left August leg. "Vane, keep it distracted," Dex yelled. "I'm almost there. Working on it." I shot back, gritting my teeth. I lunged from behind the pillar, aiming for the android's exposed core. This time, my blade pierced through the armor, slicing into the sensitive circuitry beneath. The machine spasmed, its movements jerky as it tried to process the damage. Riker's voice crackled in my comm, "One down." He'd taken out his android, leaving a smoking heap of metal in its place. "Need help. Finish this one off." I shouted, leaping away as the android flailed wildly, sparks flying from its damaged core. Riker stepped in, unleashing a barrage of plasma rounds that tore through the machine, finally bringing it crashing to the ground. The gang leader stood behind them, his face a mask of calm arrogance. "Impressive," he sneered. "But you're out of your depth." I stalked toward him, blades dripping with the oil-like fluid from the android. "You don't get to walk away from this." He smirked and raised a cybernetic hand, activating a control panel on his wrist. The ground beneath us trembled as the entire facility began to hum with power. "You think you're avenging them? You're nothing but a speck in the machine. You can kill me, but you'll never stop what's coming." "Let's test that theory," I hissed, charging at him. The fight was brutal. He was faster than I anticipated, his cybernetic enhancements giving him the upper hand in speed and strength. Every swing of his augmented arms was a blur, and I barely managed to dodge, countering with precise strikes of my own. "You're persistent," he taunted, blocking one of my strikes with a reinforced forearm. He twisted, catching me off guard and sending me crashing into a console. The impact jarred my augments, and my HUD flickered for a moment before stabilizing. "Persistent enough to end you," I spat, pushing myself up. As we clashed, Dex and Riker worked to shut down the facility's defenses. Dex's fingers flew over the controls, bypassing firewalls and overriding systems while Riker provided cover fire. "Astra, we've got a problem," Dex called. "This place is rigged to blow. He's got a failsafe." I cursed under my breath, slashing at the gang leader's leg and forcing him to stumble. "How long?" "Minutes, if that." The gang leader laughed, blood dripping from a gash in his cheek. "You lose either way. Document heroes like you always do." I lunged forward, driving my blade into his chest. He gasped, his cybernetic eyes flickering as his systems failed. "Not this time," I said, my voice cold. Pulling my blade free, I turned to Dex. "Shut it down." "I'm trying," he shouted, sweat dripping down his face as he worked furiously. The tremors grew stronger, and the hum of the facility reached a deafening pitch. Riker grabbed my arm. "We need to move." "No, not yet," I shouted, refusing to leave without finishing this. Dex slammed a final command into the console, and the hum abruptly stopped. The lights flickered, and the tremors subsided. "Got it," he gasped, collapsing against the console. "Time to go," Riker said, pulling me toward the exit. We emerged into the night, the glow of the city skyline stretching out before us. The facility was silent now, a lifeless husk. But I couldn't shake the weight pressing down on me. "You good?" Riker asked, his tone softer than usual. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. The gang leader was dead, but his words lingered in my mind. "You'll never stop what's coming." As we boarded the hovercraft, I pulled out Caitlin's hollow bracelet. It flickered weakly in my hand, a reminder of why I'd fought so hard. Her voice echoed in my mind, steady and unyielding. "Promise me you'll never stop helping others." "I promise," I whispered, clutching the bracelet tightly. But deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. This city, with its endless shadows and broken promises, still had so many to protect. And I wouldn't stop, not until every last light was restored. Months passed, though it felt like years compressed into moments. The sprawl had grown quieter, or maybe I had just become numb to its chaos. Missions came and went, and each one chipped away at the hardened walls I had built around myself. Yet, through it all, Caitlin's promise remained my anchor. The hollow bracelet sat on my workbench, fully repaired now. I'd spent endless nights tinkering with its circuitry, desperate to preserve every fragment of her memory. It felt like a piece of her still existed, glowing faintly in the dim light of my pod. But lately, something was off. I wasn't myself. Missions that once felt routine now left me winded. My augmentations, usually an extension of my body, felt sluggish. My neural interface began flashing warnings, abnormal hormone levels, fluctuating vitals. At first, I dismissed it as burnout. The sprawl had a way of grinding you down. But then came the nausea, the faint dizziness that followed me like a shadow. Riker noticed first. "You look like shit," he said one morning, sliding me a protein bar. "Gee, thanks," I muttered, forcing a smile. But his concern lingered, even as I brushed him off. Eventually, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I hooked myself up to the med scanner in the base's infirmary, letting the cold light of the machine sweep over me. The results appeared in my HUD, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Pregnant. My neural interface repeated the word in sterile, clinical tones, but it still felt unreal. How? The memories came flooding back, brief, stolen moments of closeness from months ago, during a rare reprieve between missions. An evening spent in the arms of someone I'd allowed myself to trust, even if only for a fleeting moment. The revelation hit me like a shockwave. In a world as broken as this one, what place was there for a new life? Yet, as I stared at the hollow bracelet glowing softly on my workbench, something shifted within me. Caitlin's voice echoed in my mind. "Promise me you'll never stop helping others." It wasn't just a promise to her anymore. It was a promise to this life growing within me, a promise to build something better, to protect what mattered. Riker found me later, sitting on the edge of the base's rooftop, the city stretching out below in a sea of neon and shadows. "You've been quiet," he said, leaning against the railing. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. He blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean? Leaving the squad?" I nodded, meeting his gaze. "I have something I need to take care of. Something bigger than all this." Riker studied me for a long moment before sighing. "You're serious?" "Yeah," I said, placing a hand on my stomach, hidden beneath layers of synthweave. "I am." For once, he didn't argue. "You're one hell of a fighter, Astra. If anyone can make it out there, it's you." The next day, I packed what little I owned, a few tools, a stash of med supplies, and Caitlin's hollow bracelet. As I stepped onto the city's edge, the sprawling chaos of the world stretched before me, both terrifying and full of possibility. This wasn't the end of my fight, it was the beginning of a new one. For Caitlin. For the child I carried. For every soul in the sprawl that still believed in light amidst the darkness. The city hummed with its usual life as I disappeared into its depths, a lone figure against the neon glow. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for the future,